Good Thursday to you, everybody. Incom 651. Welcome to week boom 8, something like that. Yeah, 8. We are here, the halfway point. 16 weeks in the semester, 8 weeks in. All right. How's everybody doing? You doing all right? Let's get things started correctly. What do we have on our cup today? Menominee, Michigan. Not too terribly far from the last radio port of call of the Edmund Fitzgerald on that fateful journey that became immortalized. If you don't know what I'm talking about, ask Google. Okay, let's take a look at what we're doing this week, and then we'll look back at the questions from next week. A few things to note right out of the gate. I think number 2 brought my attention to the fact that I had set the due date for phase 2 of your PR campaign for during modular week. That was, I think I said it for Thursday. No, I don't want you working during modular week. Excuse me. So we're going to push the due date for phase 2 until March the 16th. That is the Monday on the other side of modular week. All right. And in fact, I could even probably, now let's scratch that. Let's put it on the 18th. That's 2 days in to the week on the other side of modular week. So group 2, I know when you asked me, I said, okay, let's change it to the 16th. I will send out an announcement in addition to this. So to each of the groups in the discussion board, and then I will change it in Canvas. We will move the due date to the 18th of March. That's a Wednesday. All right. So it's not due during modular week. You don't have to work during modular week. I mean, unless you want to get caught up on things, and that's fine. Like get moving down the road on your technology tool. That's okay. But I'm not going to require that. All right. Okay. This week, we are going to be looking at SWOT analyses and other like analyses like noise and SOAR and SCORE. So if you get out into an organization and you hear these terms, you won't be caught in a position of going, what? Okay. Light readings this week, giving you the opportunity to focus on your PR plan. I think I said technology tool. Sorry, I'm thinking about something else. To focus on your phase 2 of your PR plan. So we don't have any readings from the books. I have 2 articles for you. One that looks at some of the limitations of a SWOT analysis, and then another article that looks at 4 other analyses that you may or may not come in contact with when when you get out and about into the business world. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing this week. Focus on that phase 2. Read those articles. Hit the discussion questions. Now, for the phases, let me ask you. In fact, let me remind you that when you upload the phase, when you're finished, only one person from your team should be uploading the completed product, and that's your team leader. Nobody else should upload the document. I'm looking at a scenario in which one of the teams, there was more than one copy of the presentation uploaded, and I haven't compared the 2 texts side by side, but the copy that I saw that I evaluated may not have been the final copy that the team did. So, if we were being true to the scenario, that is, if you were dealing with a client and you sent them 2 copies of your document of your proposal, and there was a difference between the two, the client would probably dump you because they'd be wondering what what is this group doing? Why can't they, get coordinated enough to know which one of these we're supposed to be looking at? Why is there more than one, and why that's okay? Because they don't want to wonder, are you sending out duplicates or incomplete documents on their behalf? All right. So groups work well together, work frequently together. Group leaders stay on top of stuff. Keep your group informed. Make sure that only one copy of the document that is phase 2 gets uploaded, and that's uploaded by you. Because if not, you're missing the main point of the exercise. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to be doing this week. And I will, again, send a little announcement out to the discussion boards to each of the teams that we're going to move the due date for phase 2. We're going to move it to March the 18th. All right, let's take a look at what you did last week. In the questions, we have been, again, concerning ourselves with ethics within PR. One of these questions was a trick question, and I'll get to that. But question number 1. According to your authors, what is missing from the discussion of public relations? Kai, let's take you. According to the authors, research is missing from the discussion of public relations. That's absolutely correct. That's what they say. The authors note that most public relations practitioners do not do their own research, preferring instead to outsource it to companies whose business is to quickly and efficiently conduct research for the clients. If they're not willing to conduct their own research, they must not yet fully understand its importance while it is handled by other companies. The author also explains that research is not even discussed among some of the largest PR firms and associations. That is discussed like doing it in-house. Excuse me. However, ethics and research go hand in hand because ethical principles provide the foundation for responsible, trustworthy, humane scientific discovery. Ethics serves as the moral compass that ensures research respects human rights, maintains integrities, and benefits society. If this is missing from the discussion or is not considered within PR research, there's a high chance of error and equality oversight leading to scientific harm. Okay, exactly. They're not doing the research in-house because there are a number of companies that specialize in this. Now, why isn't it that they're outsourcing it? Why isn't it that they're doing it in-house but outsourcing it to these companies? Okay, there are a couple of reasons for that. All right. Number 1, most people in the PR business don't understand data. They tend to be, and I would include myself in this group. They tend to be qualitative in terms of their natural tendencies as a thinker and a communicator. So they lean into the qualitative, and they just don't bother to learn about the quantitative. If you approach it like, if you keep in mind the essence of what's going on, if you approach it like you would any communication problem, I'm hoping, and what I'm about to encourage you, that this will demystify some of the quantitative as opposed to the qualitative. As I've said before, think of it like this. Think of a communication in terms of signs and signifiers. What does the sign signify? All right. Let me give you an example here really quick. My son is very interested in 3D printing, and he has a couple of 3D printers, and he's always making little models of this and that and the other thing. Okay, so he printed this for me. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, it's a little 3D. I mean, it's quite small. It's about yo big. Okay, maybe if I shield some of the light. Okay, it is a 3D print of an owl. Okay, can you see that? Okay, so, and he gave this to me. Now, of all the things that he could have 3D printed, why an owl? Okay, so the owl is the sign. The question is, in printing it and giving it to me, what is he trying to signify? That is the fundamental operation of communication. That's your business. That is figuring out what the sign signifies. And, spoiler alert, I mean, he knows I spend a lot of time outside, that we have owls where I live. I like owls. I like the sound of owls. And, there's the iconographic representation of wisdom through by way of the owl. Wise old owl, wise as an owl. So, he's telling me, oh, I see you as a wise person, and I see you as someone that likes owls. Here is the sign, the figurine, to signify that communication. Okay, you get that? That's the fundamental aspect of any communication, and in fact, it's everywhere. Right? The clothes we wear, the gestures we make with our hands, the imagery that is on and around us. These are all signs and signifiers. But you may be wondering, that's fabulous. How does that translate into me looking at quantitative research in a more palatable way? Just remember, don't get freaked out. A letter is a sign. A number is a sign. A string of letters is a word. That's a sign. It signifies something. A string of numbers is a statistic. That's a sign, and it signifies something. Just whenever you're looking at qualitative or quantitative, try to keep in mind that they're doing the same thing. It's just signs and signifiers, and what it signifies. That's it. And so learn what the signs signify. And quantitative research may seem a little less alien. And then going out into the market in strategic communication, you will have a leg up. You will be a valuable commodity because many of your competition are qualitative by nature, and they don't understand that it's all about sign and signifiers. And as a consequence, they just, like, I don't even talk about numbers. I don't want to get started. Okay. Now, this might mean you go to work for one of these one of these data firms that supplies the companies with the data. But back to the question, why is this problematic? Well, because if you don't understand how or what the sign signifies, you're much more likely to make a mistake in your interpretation or even get tricked in the presentation, whether it's a third party or a competitor or the feedback that you get from the market, whatever it is. Especially for those of you who are interested in doing your own thing, and I've talked to some of you, say, I'd like to do a not-for-profit, I'd like to open up my own company. Great. Okay, bear in mind, whether you're a not-for-profit or a for-profit, you're both companies, and bear in mind that I think it's the first 3 years, 80% of businesses that start fail. And then I think the number is 5. I think it might be 10, but I think it's 5. And then over the course of 5 years, 50% fail. What does that mean? That means within the span of 5 years, whether you're going to make a living at doing this thing or not is basically a coin flip. Now, it doesn't mean that it's just like, oh, that's just the odds, could heads or tails, could work or not. No. The reason for those, let's be honest, depressing statistics, numbers, is a failure of communication. Most people that start their own business, be it for profit or not for profit, don't understand how to interpret the signs and what they signify. They don't research the market. So they don't know how valued their product or service is to the market before they start pouring in investment into it in the way of their time and their money, and need to get a return. That is to make a living. But they haven't taken the time, and many of them just don't take the time, but they don't know how to use the tools to gauge what the public, at what level the public values what it is they want to do. And then on the other side, when they start getting input from the public, they haven't taken the time to learn the skills, master the tools that helps them evaluate that input, saying, well, we like what you're doing over here, but we're not crazy about what you're doing over here. And the business fails. Okay. So I know we have been spending a fair bit of time in the data area in this class, but that's why, because this is more and more data driven. Now, I said one of these questions was slightly a trick question. With, there was some aspect about it that was a trick question. Okay, this was question number 1. All right, because while it's true, your authors say that research is missing, meaning research done by the companies. You can't establish ethical standards. You ought not to establish ethical standards by way of research. You should establish ethical standards on immutable principles that then guide research. All right. So I want you, especially as Christian scholars, to make sure that you get that. Don't get the cart in front of the horse. Put things in proper order. All right. Foundational principles drive what we do, not what we do drives foundational principles. And there are some biggies, and they popped up in question 2 and 3, ethical guidelines in question 2, primary ethical concerns. Okay, so here's some foundational principles that as Christians, it's hard baked into our worldview, into our faith, and it has been since the very beginning, and has set us apart from the very beginning. Okay, and here's perhaps the foundational principle: the value of every individual is inalienable, non-dependent, okay, and non-transferable. In other words, every human being has equal value simply because they are. That value has not been conferred upon them by any earthly organization. It comes from the Creator, and it cannot be transferred out. It cannot be taken away because of circumstance. That is one of the immutable principles. It's just, and it's baked into our founding documents as a nation. And that's the truths that we hold as self-evident, meaning there's just no discussion here. Now, does that mean that humans and human institutions can't violate those immutable truths? Well, of course they can. But a violation of an absolute doesn't detract from the absoluteness of the absolute. You understand? All right. I mean, in the system that we live in, let's say physical system, it's an absolute that everything moves towards the center of this material world, gravity. Okay. But because an airplane moves through the air, it doesn't negate gravity, right? It's still there, right? So a violation of the principle, of the immutable principle, doesn't negate the principle. It's just a violation. It's just wrong. So what I want you to do as you go out into your careers, I want you to keep in mind that ethics are not researched and determined. Research and determination are driven by immutable principles of ethics, like the value of the individual, like the requirement of transparency. Most of what ought to drive our behavior, whether it's in research or otherwise, and I don't mean to be simplistic, but really can be found in the Ten Commandments. And you don't have to be, someone does not have to be a practicing Christian or Jew to understand this. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal are pretty good ways to run the neighborhood, whether you worship Yahweh or Jesus Christ. Okay, and as Christians, especially, we're called to, one, understand this. That is, what we do are driven by foundational, immutable principles, not the other way around. All right. And then number two, they are binding upon everyone, whether or not one is a practitioner of the faith. They're binding upon us all, not because we practice our faith. They're binding upon us all because they're given to us by God. And the practice of our faith is the recognition of that fact, that is, that they're given to us by God. Okay? So make sure that you get things in proper order as you move out and do your good work as a Christian communication expert. Question number 2. Of the 6 ethical guidelines listed by Stack, which one would you say is most important in conducting PR research, and why? Now, if you were to see this type of question on an exam, a wink, it might be, which of the following is not among the 6 ethical issues? Or I might say, consider the 6 ethical guidelines, which is the most important, write a short essay. My point is that I need you to be able to, commit them to memory. Okay. All right. Cinda, let's take a look at you. I believe that treating research participants honestly and fairly is the most important. Stack references 2 cases involving participants of the Milgram experiment and the Zimbrando experiment. Both examples show that the participants were not made aware of the extreme psychological pressure or behavioral effects they would face by participating in the studies. Okay, that is true. And then you give a very, very good answer here, Cinda. And people, pay attention when you see a well-researched answer among your peers. Dig into it, because this will help you commit these principles to memory. Here I want to read a little bit more from other contributors, because I have something to suggest to you by way of what, how among these, how you might rank order them. That is, which one is the most important. Okay. So Carolyn, you list the 5 ethical principles, and you're omitting 6. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. Finally, federal code. Okay, so you do have 6. All right, but here we go. All research participants must agree actively to participate in the research. All research participants must agree actively. So you have this twice. Participants must understand what they're volunteering for. The actual research must not harm the individual, either psychologically or physical. Participants' actions, behaviors, or statements must remain confidential and anonymous. Okay, all true. All right. Here's what I want to suggest to you by way of ethical guidelines where research is concerned, because now this is my opinion. All right. I believe the most important ethical guideline, yes, you have to have these things when you're dealing with research participants. Okay. It is of equal importance that you fully disclose the relationship between the participant and the researcher to the general public. Because remember what the goal of research is. It's not descriptive statistics. That is, the goal is not to generate data about the research group. I mean, maybe in some instances, no. The goal is to generate inferential statistics, stuff that you can infer to the population as a whole. All right. What is frequently omitted from the generation of those inferential statistics is the relationship between participant and researcher, or participant in and experiment, and the effect that that has on the outcome of the experiment. This is particularly true in research that concerns psychology, psychiatry, and pharmacology. We know, for instance, that just having someone to talk to, just having someone who will listen to you empathetically, right? You know, with an attitude of understanding on a regular basis, is as effective in alleviating symptoms of depression as most of the pharmaceutical antidepressants, right? And you know, I'm not skewing, you know, a biased opinion about antidepressants one way or another, right? And telling you this, okay? What's often omitted from the data that's generated by the research, in which they take groups of individuals who have identified as depressed and then start giving them pharmaceuticals, is the effect of the interview times that the participants get to take advantage of with those who are running the experiments. Sit down. Well, how are you feeling? How has this week been compared to last week? Well, tell me about the symptoms. What was it that triggered the depression, et cetera, et cetera? That is, they're having this discussion, these discussions with the individuals that are running the experiments while being given the pharmaceutical. So in other words, this is a co-founding variable in the experiment. And things of this sort, and you know, I'm not necessarily picking on experiments where SSRIs are concerned, but I'm using this as an example because it's a widely prescribed medication in a whole bunch of different forms. It's a tremendous amount of money involved in the industry. And it's not wholly honest in the data, the results that are presented. All right. So it's your job as savvy communicators, okay, to look behind the experiment, to ask, how was the data generated, to wonder, okay, what could be the co-founding variables here? You know, you have the independent variable, the dependent variable. Well, what if you have more than one independent variable that's influencing the outcome of the dependent variable, and it's not being disclosed? This is going to skew the data, and to not identify that, to isolate that, and worst of all, not to acknowledge that in the results, very unethical, dishonest. Question number 3. According to your authors, what are the primary ethical concerns in reporting data for PR, from PR research? Okay, so after, you know, the ethical considerations in going to get it, in generating it, now reporting it. Rashad, let's see what you did. In public relations research, the primary ethical concern in reporting data centers on honesty, transparency, responsibility to both client and the public. Perfect. You know, if you had a question like this on an exam, I would expect something like that. And then, of course, when you give your answer, unpack it a little bit. Okay, tell me why, you know, why this is important. So back to you, Rashad. According to Stacks, the research should be conducted and reported in a way that reflects accuracy rather than persuasion through manipulation. Sounds familiar. what was that? I heard somebody say, be an investigator, not an advocator. Who said that? Oh, it's me. Investigate the phenomenon. Don't advocate the desired outcome. One of the biggest ethical issues is selective reporting, highlighting only favorable findings while ignoring data that contradicts the desired message. This creates a distorted picture of reality that can mislead decision makers. And that's why I gave you the article, How Not to Get Fooled by the Numbers. Okay. with money and pressure and competition involved, this sort of malfeasance, bad practice is inevitable. It is your responsibility as a trained, ethical, strategic communicator to know what steps to go through to check to see if there's been any hanky-panky in the gathering and the analysis of the data, to know what the excuse me, what the quantitative steps are and how you handle data, and to flag any problems with the first two. You don't have to become a data researcher yourself. I mean, you might want to be, all right? But what you do have to do is develop the skill sets that lets you ask the right questions and clearly evaluate the answers that you get. Okay. You don't have to be a mechanic, but you should know something about how the engine runs. All right. Does that make sense? Okay, everybody. You keep doing your wonderful, wonderful work that you're doing. I will send out a notice through the discussion boards that we are changing the due date for phase 2 of your PR presentation to the 18th. All right. So, yeah, don't work on it during a modular week. Work on other things like yourself or your family or other classes and stuff like that. Okay. Have a wonderful, wonderful modular week, because I won't be posting videos. You won't see me. I'll see you on the other side of the week. All right. But remember, I think about you. I pray about you. I'll see you in week 10, excuse me, on Canvas. Okay. God bless. Goodbye.